So today what we're going to look at is another set of methods. The first thing we're going to do is look at how to set up a variable inside of App Inventor. So in App Inventor, this has to be done from the blocks. You can't do it in the designer. So you go over to your blocks, and you're going to click on Variables, and you're going to get something that says Initialize Global Name to. We're going to change the word, we're going to drag that onto our screen, and we're going to change the name of it from name to circle size, and we're going to attach to it a number. Now, I want to explain to you what it means to say global. In Scratch, when you guys created a variable, you had an option to make it available to all of the sprites or make it so only worked with that sprite. If you checked make it available to all sprites, that made it global. Global means anyone can use it. Any sprite can use it. You can see that our option choices in App Inventor do not let us do initializing a global. And then we have another one that says initialize a local in. So when we're doing a local, we have to say where we're creating the local at. Who's going to have access to it? To make our lives easier right now, we're going to do just globals. So we don't have to worry about picking where we want it to be active at. So that's the difference between the local and the globals. Who has access to it? If it's global, everyone has access to it. So we're going to create a global variable. So why don't you pause the video and go ahead and do that now, and we'll move on to the rest of it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the method that you had before. So when the canvas is touched, you had this draw circle method, and it got the X and it got the Y. Now what we're going to do is have it get the global circle size. To do that, if you click up here in circle size, you have to be careful how you click it, and I'll show you in App Inventor. So if I click up here, see where it switches to a hand? I know I can do it. You have to get it clicked just right. All right. So the other way to get it, there it is. See how it popped up when I hovered over it? So you're going to drag this get global size into your radius. So let me say that again. You're going to go to your initial global size and just hover the mouse over circle size and drag that into the radius when you get the pop-up. So another command after that is to set global circle size. And you get that command the same way. You go into App Inventor and you hover the mouse over the variable. You'll get these two options. The second one is set global circle size. And you notice it's missing the puzzle piece. So you're going to go back into App Inventor and drag the set global circle size beneath the draw circle method. Then you're going to do a math calculation where you get the global circle size and double it. So you can do times 2. So drag in the math calculation for multiplication. So you would find that under math. It's blue. Find the times, drag that in. Then you're going to drag in the 2 spots to fill those 2 puzzle pieces. One being global circle size, the other one would be a number 2. When you do that, that has the effect of making your app make the circles bigger every time you touch the screen. It doubles in size every time. So it starts at 1, and then as we touch the screen, it gets bigger and bigger. When you shut down the app and restart it again, it starts back at 1. The global gets reset. It gets initialized in the very beginning of the program. That's when this occurs. As soon as it loads, The global variables all get initialized. You don't have to do anything with screen initialize. You don't have to tell it to do that. That happens automatically. All the global variables are initialized with this command at the start of the program. You cannot reinitialize a variable. You can only do it one time. You can change its value by using the set command. But you cannot reinitialize it. And that's important to understand that variables can only be initialized one time. So if you dragged in another initialize command for the same variable, you would find an error. It would give you one of those little red flags. So pause the video, finish that up. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a sphere or a ball to our project. The ball behaves much the same as the image sprites, but it's just a ball. We could change its size, we could change its color, but it's just a ball. It's just an extra tool that they added in there, so that way you don't have to have an image sprite for everything. You can just have a little ball in there. We're also going to add in a clock into this. So that way we can keep track of what we're doing. One of the things I'm going to ask you guys to do tomorrow is to add in a clock to your soundboard. So you can kind of add a delay feature that will go off when your soundboard is kind of pressed, and then you leave it and you walk away from it. We talked about doing that. So you guys are going to do that tomorrow, and this is how you're going to do it. So first thing we're going to do in the designer is you're going to find in drawing an animation a ball, and you're just going to drag it onto the screen somewhere. It's going to be by default black. You can change the background if you choose to. The easiest way to click on it is to find it in the list over here. If I can find it, there it is. You can change the color to anything you want. Okay, and it'll set the start color. You can make it bigger, make it smaller. Don't worry about speed and all of that. We're going to change all of that later. We're going to talk about what that means at a later project. So right now you just have the ball there. The other thing I want you to add in is go to Sensors. And you have this thing called a clock. I would like you to click and drag that onto your screen, and it'll show up at the bottom. And while we're at it, I'm going to add in a couple other things. I want you to add in the accelerometer sensor. That's going to determine whether or not the computer, or the phone in this case, is shaking. So you're going to add in an accelerometer to there. And then the last one is a new one, TTS. That is under... So if you click on Media, you'll find a text-to-speech control. You're going to drag that onto the screen. Now you'll notice that mine have names. I changed the name of my clock. Let's see if I can make this a little bit. One of the important things, folks, is naming these appropriately. We want to make sure that we're naming our objects so they make sense in code. So I named my clock CLK ball movement. CLK is an abbreviation for clock. I like to use 3-letter abbreviations that represent what the object is before I name it. Just what I like to do. You could just call it the ball clock. You could call it the movement clock. Whatever you want to call it, it should make sense of what it's going to be. But for our purposes today, can everyone please name the clock CLK ball movement? Then you're going to name the accelerometer and call it ACC, I am shaking. And finally, I want the text-to-speech to be called TTS, shaking. TTS, shaking. So rename all 3 of those. Pause the video until you have it done, so that way you can see the names. So whatever you named your clock, most of you should have named it the same. But whatever you named your clock, you're going to click on your clock in the blocks window. So we're going to set up a clock timer so that the ball moves across the screen, we're also going to set up a new global variable called global distance. And we're going to make it so the ball moves every time the clock event goes off. Now you might say, well, wait, what's going to make the clock event go off? Well, one of the properties of the clock is it has a millisecond number that tells you how often it fires. That's the word we use for it. So every 1,000 milliseconds, or every 1 second, that clock is going to fire. So if we look at this in the designer, so in the designer you'll see under the properties of the clock, you'll see that it's always fires, it's enabled, and the timer interval is set to 1,000. That's not 1,000 seconds, that's 1,000 milliseconds. There are 1,000 milliseconds at every 1 second. So 2,000 milliseconds would be 2 seconds. 3,000 milliseconds would be 3 seconds. So we're going to make sure that that says 1,000. As soon as the program initializes, that clock timer starts counting. And every 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds, whatever events are in the clock timer event will happen. So the next thing I want you to do is to create this variable called distance. So follow the procedure that we did before. Create the variable called distance. Then we're going to take the method that says when the clock ball movement timer, or whatever you called your clock, hopefully you renamed it. It's not just clock 1. And we're going to drag that method in. And we're going to set the x value for the ball, and we're going to do some math. So we take its current x value and add the distance from the variable, and you get that just by highlighting. There we go. Putting the mouse right over the word distance, and you can drag that right into the addition. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to want you to do this bit of code here where you initialize the variable. You find the method for the clock timer, which you can find by clicking on the clock properties, which you can find over here under clock movement. And for the ball bouncer, same thing. You click on the ball bouncer, and you should be able to go through these lists of properties here and find the one that we want, which is the ball bouncer x value. When you scroll down, it's right there, my ball bouncer x. That's the name what I called my ball. Yours might still be called ball 1. I renamed mine. So you're going to do that and set up your code. So it looks like this. Okay? So I'm going to pause the video so you can go ahead and do that, and we'll pick up from there. So now we're going to add one more piece to this. We want our ball to bounce off the edge, because if it doesn't, it'll just kind of roam off the edge of the screen and go on forever. So we're going to add another method for when my ball, my bouncer, whatever you called your ball, maybe you call it ball 1, dot edge reached. So when it reaches the edge, we're going to take that global distance and we're going to multiply it by -1. So that way what we're doing is we're subtracting 3 every time rather than adding 3 every time. And that'll end up moving the ball in the other direction. So every time it hitches an edge, it'll multiply by -1, and I'll have the effect of changing the direction. So when it hits one edge, it'll become -3. When it hits the other edge, it'll become +3. And that'll end up having the effect of moving the ball back and forth across the screen. You can change the value from 3 to a bigger number if you wanted to get it to move faster. The bigger the number, the faster it's going to move. It might look a little glitchy at that point, though, because it's jumping. Right? If you made it 50, it's going to kind of look like it just jumps and jumps and jumps. It's going to move really fast, and it's not going to be as smooth. So 3 is a nice number. We have another method for moving things across the screen, which I'll show you another point. So create this method now for the ball bouncer dot edge reached. You don't have to worry about the property edge. That's if you want to dictate which edge it is bounced. Right now, we're not distinguishing the top, the bottom, the left, or the right. Any edge that it bounces off of, it's going to do this. So we're going to set the global distance to, you can get that just by hovering over the word distance with your mouse. And we're going to set that to the global distance times -1, again, using a math component from the blue section. So I'm going to pause the video. I want you to go ahead and do that. So the next thing we're going to talk about is some of the other sensor events. We already have an accelerometer and a text-to-speech in our code. So let's look at that. This is where our accelerometer went. We just dragged it to the bottom. And we did our text-to-speech. What we're going to do is take our accelerometer, and we called it something different. We called it ACC, I am shaking. We're going to take the method for that accelerometer, and we're going to use the text-to-speech method called speak, and we're going to add in a text box called I am shaking. So this component you find, this method you find by clicking on your accelerometer component. This method you find by clicking on your text-to-speech method. We've done this a couple times with a couple different objects. The only one that's a little weird where you find that one is the I am shaking. So you go back to App Inventor, and it's right here where it says text, that red box. When you click on that, you have the option of getting this box up here. There's a lot of other string operators that are included here that we're going to look at later. These are all things that you can do to what are called strings, or words and letters put together in a string of characters. So we can do a whole bunch of different things with this. We're only going to do the top one right now, this box right here, and then you're going to drag it into your code and link it right there for the message and type in I am shaking. You can type in whatever you want. This has a very interesting effect now. When you run this app and you shake your phone will speak to you. It will say I am shaking. The other thing you could do on the emulator, if you don't have a phone, is there is a button on the upper right-hand side of the Knox emulator that simulates a shaking of the phone. So you can do a shake of your phone and actually see that effect. The emulator that comes with App Inventor cannot do that. You have to use the Knox emulator to do that. So go ahead and put this code in, and I'll pause the video while you guys do that. So now, here's what I want you to do with this. I would like you to take the I Have a Dream app, and I would like you to modify it so it plays a sound when you shake it. You could use the sounds that are already on there and just add to it the ability to play a sound when it's shaking. Then I would also like you to add a delay timer, so that way when you press one of the speeches, rather than playing right away, it waits 3 seconds and then plays. So you have to really think about how you're going to do that one. It involves 2 separate methods to make that happen. The extension? Oh, extending the app. We're extending what it does. So I'm going to give you a hint for the timer. Instead of pausing the sound, you might want to disable the timer and have the sound play when the timer fires. So when you set up your timer, you want to make sure it originally starts as disabled. When you press the button, rather than playing the sound, you enable the timer, and inside the timer, it plays the sound. So I'd like you to go ahead and do that. That's the final thing for today's lesson. And this is not to be submitted yet. We have other things to do. But I would like you to submit in Blackboard So I want you to submit the APK and the AIA file that we did for drawing variables. Today, these notes in class that you did in these videos, I want them submitted into here to show that you followed along and you did what I asked you to do. Those get submitted right here.